Welcome to SoCal Voices, Impact Device, a student led investigative podcast where we examine the history and impact of immigration and customs enforcement in Southern California.
Hi, I'm Danny Antich,
Hi there, I'm Amarri McCall.
and we're doing our podcast episode on politics and music. How this topic came to be was for me personally, I was at home with my uncle watching the Grammys, and I believe it was Billie Eilish who accepted her award and was saying that can't be illegal on stolen land. And my uncle had made a comment saying, "Why is everything so political? This and that." And I will say for him, stands on the more conservative side. But yeah, so the idea came to me where I was like, everyone has this idea that music and politics has never been this thing, but music itself has always been a form of expression. We can go back into history points and like think of Nina Simone if Mario wants to speak on that.
Nina Simone's actually a really great example. She was a pivotal civil rights activist and also a singer who confronted racism, inequality, and injustice. She's famously reflecting the times in her music, especially. One thing that she was really known for was her protest music. And that form of music really influenced the classical background, jazz and blues. Kind of just meshed together, and it shows you like how political protest music is not new. People have been doing it for centuries, and if anything, people are just doing it's showing out more so now because we're in a very political time at this moment, and it's unfortunately not the best safest time for a lot of Americans, not only people who don't have citizenship, but just for any American that is a person of color. They're really dangerous times, but one of her notable songs would be Mississippi Goddamn from 1963, Four Women from 1966, Backlash Blues from 1967, and To Be Young, Gifted, and Black is a very famous one from 1969. It talks about the joyous anthem of pride and resilience inspired by Lorraine Hansberry.
I will also add that there is an article on her from PBS where she talks about the creation of the music and how it came to be, and was deciding to use music as a form of expression. Where she
Yeah.
quotes, "At first, I tried to make myself a gun. I gathered some materials. I was going to take one of them out, and I didn't care who it was," Simone famously said after hearing of the Birmingham bombing. "Then Andy, my
Hmm.
husband at the time, said to me, 'Nina, you can't kill anyone. You're a musician. Do what you do.' And when I sat
Hmm.
down, the whole song happened. I never stopped writing until the whole thing was finished." And I think that's a great point because I mean, she's using her form that she uses to express herself and about everything going on in the world. And I mean, we've always gone to music for our feelings, whether it be we're happy, we're sad, this and that. I think it's a great point because, again, I just said we go to music to feel things, but all of a sudden using music to say, oh, like we can't be political about it, but it's been there since, I mean, the 60s. We have proof here. And
Yeah.
that also like brings up another musician, Bob Dylan, who also got his start around that time during the civil rights era and creating music like Times Are Changing and all those other stuffs. And I think of one specific moment where he got booed at the Bill of Rights dinner. And in the speech, he starts talking about everything going on during that time. And Bob Dylan has always been someone who's very outspoken about his beliefs. I think just as Nina Simone, he's never been afraid to express his beliefs. And I mean, in this speech, he starts talking about like his friends who are both like black and white, and like the people he hangs out with or surrounds himself with. And he's in a room with a bunch of people who are like suits and at the time just white people. And he's like, I don't really want to be around you in this time. I'd rather be with my friends or the people who understand kind of what's going on or the people who are affected.
Mhm.
And right around this time was the time of President Kennedy had just gotten shot. And Bob Dylan mentions that he himself sees himself in Lee Oswald. And
Mhm.
that caused a big ruckus, which understandable. If someone kills someone and you say you see yourself in them, it's a little bit jarring. But
Mhm.
he goes on to a point to say after the dinner, and his publicists are like, oh, we'll speak for him, this and that. And then he's, if anyone's going to speak for me, I'll speak for myself. And he says, well, yes, I can understand the wording of everything is a little bit wrong or funky, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
It's the point is you get kind of so frustrated that what else are you going to do? And I mean, not to fast forward many years, but I mean, we have the whole Luigi Mangione thing. Like, the guy got so frustrated with everything going on that he resulted to something that was very wrong, I guess. I mean, it's still a form of expression. It doesn't necessarily touch on music, but it's a great point because, I mean, we are seeing it today and we're seeing it back in the 50s and the 60s. And so I think it's just important to remember that it's always been there. And
Yeah.
I think then the people who are out here speaking, saying, like, oh, why do we have to make everything political? They're the same people who grew up on this music. And so I just
Yeah.
think there's that irony in that. And I mean, we
Yeah.
have even music today with like Green Day, The Strokes, and everyone.
I think like when they go, why is everything so political? Especially growing up with artists like that, it's like going back to to the point that you made about Luigi Mangione. You don't really identify with things like that until your back is put against the wall or starts affecting somebody close
But
to
that's
you. I
also
think
what makes political music, like a lot of these artists have had things happen to them in their childhood or early upbringing, and that's what encourages them to do what they do. I would say a really good example of that is Kendrick Lamar. He grew up in Compton, California, and he grew up in the crack era. So drugs everywhere, people doing drugs in his living room. Eventually, he went into being a gang member, and that came with all of that behind it. So with certain artists, you would call it protest music, but at the same time, it's just music of how their life is and how it's going and what they want more. And they turn it into a protest. I would say Kendrick Lamar's music is definitely protest music, but I wouldn't reduce it to that. I think it's a play on how his life was
Right.
and how it was for everybody around him. And it shows you, he talks about systematic oppression. He talks about racism. He talks about the government funding, such as wars and sickness and everything. He talks about all of that in his music. A really good thing to mention was his Super Bowl performance, where he talked about Uncle Sam, again, during a really political time when a certain administration got into office. So, he was talking about that and all the new policies and the new enforcements that was coming along with that administration. He addressed that in the Super Bowl, which is very controversial to do. Super Bowl doesn't really, they're very strict with certain things. So I'll just leave it at that. But he utilized symbolism such as the using of Uncle Sam being played by a black man. That's something in it as well. Even the words, no, Mr. Lamar, you're supposed to play the game, insinuating that America's a big game and everything, and it's all a big hoax and a big stage. So I think he does that beautifully. But I think that people do miss the point a lot because they're like, this is supposed to be entertainment. But that's the point. The only way you would truly understand, nobody reads news like that anymore, to be honest. A lot of people just watch online on a short reel or in a form like this, a podcast episode. A lot of people don't sit down and read what's going on. I think everything's turning political because artists are trying to get people to listen to what's happening to them underneath their noses. But that's my take on it.
No, I completely agree with you. And I think we spoke with CSUN student Sergio Martinez, and he said very similar things. He himself mentioned Kendrick Lamar and mentioned J. Cole, and I'll let him speak for himself.
Sergio, do you want to start off by introducing yourself?
Yeah, hi, my name is Sergio Martinez. I'm a junior and right now I'm studying journalism, broadcasting. I'm Mexican American.
Has there been a particular message that has spoken to you or inspired you in regards to politics, whether it's from Kendrick, J. Cole?
For sure. I mean, being from LA, you kind of get more exposure to
Right.
Compton, California. One of the main specific parts of it was his album in 2014, To Pimp a Butterfly, I believe. And I know a
Nice.
lot of that. He covered a lot about racism in America, how black people are treated, and to this day still are treated unfairly, even after slavery had ended. And one of the main things was just systematic racism and police brutality. And a lot of the songs are very vulgar, but if you listen to it, he gets his point across. Just talks about a lot about slavery, and it's a very just he compares how slavery is still in shown to this day within the systemic side of it, such as with police or like just in the White House even.
Do you feel more inclined to listen to artists or follow people who give their opinions on stuff like this?
I do. I feel like a lot of it has sort of changed in a way. I feel like music is growing every day. You know, a lot of people adapt to new things. You know, there's new music that comes out every day. You know, I feel like a lot of it back then was a lot of rap in like the 2014 and like the 2018 era. Music has changed, but I still go back to it, and a lot of it still applies to today, especially when the killings of George Floyd happened,
Yeah.
and the riots and everything. A lot of people really went back to that album. It was crazy to think that what he was saying back then in his music kind of came true, how it's still going on. But right now, I would say I feel like I pay attention to artists that sort of like speak about it, that speak about things going on right now. I know some artists that I've heard speak about things going on right now, which is about like ICE deportation and all that. I've been like Tyler the Creator, and that's one of the also artists I feel like that came out like that, where they come out and I think when the elections were going on the year Joe Biden won, a lot of artists really started to speak up to go vote. You know, they didn't really take a side or anything, but they were just encouraging people to go vote. And, you know, of course, they know they have a big audience. So if they can encourage people that listen to their music to go out and vote, I think it's a great thing for artists to really use their platforms and be able to inspire the young generation, because at the end of the day, the young generation does have a very important say in what we do.
Do you feel like music even holds a place in politics in regards to influence of others? I feel like when politics is just politics, it's low key boring and a lot of people tune out versus when you get notable artists on it to talk about really important issues, it creates a more diverse group. And even with our generation, Gen Z, in the younger Gen Zs too, are more inclined to follow politics because of this. Would you agree that music holds a place in politics?
I definitely feel like it does. I don't know if you guys are familiar when Kanye was going for Trump and everything, and like
Yeah.
he was a big endorser of MAGA and like all this. If any, like I'm pretty sure everyone knows who Kanye is and how big of an audience he has. I think there was a point where he even wanted to run for president, and like he got some votes.
Mhm.
So if an artist that is known for his music and like also known for like a lot of just like the fashion world side of it, if he himself can like get that much exposure, obviously being as a big artist, I feel like it's a little bit more stronger if you're a big artist, because I mean look what Kanye did. But it holds a good place. But obviously if you're a smaller artist, because I know there's artists that really just would even like sort of stick to just talking about pure politics and include it in rap, they won't get as much exposure. That's because they don't have the sort of like spotlight to do all that.
Right.
But I just definitely feel like it holds a good place if you're a big artist. It's a little bit difficult, and I wish it wasn't as difficult, because I feel like there's talented people out there that can really just sort of talk about it in music. And I mean, who doesn't love music? But they just don't
Right.
get the same exposure as the bigger artists would, like the Kendrick Lamars and the J. Cole's. I think it's very important if we're able to get huge artists and names like I mentioned, like to just really go out and really talk about themselves and really talk about what's going on in the world. And it's better for our world to just move on and like just be like united. I feel like the more together we come, like as a whole, then we'll really see change. And that's how I feel like when artists were really pushing a vote, that it was a good thing, because if we really come together and vote, and we can spark change.
I mean, yeah, I think you're completely right on that. I think if we all stop going against one another and start working together and uniting together, I think there could be an easy change made. Maybe easy is the wrong word, but I think we could make a change together instead of when we're all against each other. But those are all the questions we have.
You did great. I really did appreciate your responses. I think they added so much value to our topic and everything.
No, yeah, glad I could help. Thank you guys for asking those questions.
Even with Sergio Martinez bringing up both these artists, I think it's important to note that the albums and the music that he's referring to, even though he's talking about artists that are very popular in current day, he doesn't even mention their music from today. He mentions their music from early 2000s or from the 2010s. And I think it's important because I mean, if we're trying to go off this idea that suddenly everything is political, music doesn't have to be, then why are we able to political music in general? But I think it's important to note that you don't even need to make political music to express your beliefs or to express certain things. I know certain artists that had their songs on certain social media platforms, and then certain administrations use them for promotional videos or something, and they immediately take their music off or they comment saying, "Don't use my music." I think even if the song itself isn't necessarily political, expressing what you believe is still a form of expression, and especially as a musician, being able to still express it, whether it be Bob Dylan at the Bill of Rights Dinner or whether it be Kendrick Lamar in his music. It's both ways of expressing yourself, and knowing that an artist is going to express themselves one way or another, it shouldn't come as a shock that when everyday life is becoming so focused on politics, it's important to remember that it's becoming so part of our everyday because of how aware and intertwined to our reality it's becoming. It's no longer, oh, this is happening far away, this and that. People can't say that. I'm going to say a hot take here where I think people who are almost, oh, music doesn't have to be political, I think they just don't want to be reminded of the poor choices that they put into office or that
Yeah.
they brought out. They just don't want to see it. And while I do agree that music and like TV and everything, there should be some fun to it, but that doesn't mean you
Yeah.
can like completely ignore what's going on, because it's so big that there's no way to ignore it without being out of touch.
Speaking of how artists express themselves and use music as a form of expression, Amari and I were able to get in contact with the musician, and I was lucky enough to have a conversation with him on his take on everything. And honestly, I'll just let him speak for himself, introduce himself.
Hi, my name is Easy. I'm a CSUN student that's graduating in a few weeks, kinesiology sports studies major.
Awesome. Amari told me that you are also a musician.
Yes, I am.
Perfect. Do you mind just sharing a bit of maybe like the genre you focus on, a little bit about that?
Yes, so I am a musician. I go by the name of YFR Easy. I've been making music for roughly about 5 to 6 years. And I make a mix of hip hop slash indie. It's either one of those two areas.
Sweet. Okay. What would you say are some artists that inspire you?
Well, one of the artists who inspire me would be Kendrick Lamar, Tyler the Creator, and Kanye West.
What we're doing is a podcast episode, and Amari and I are doing politics and music. Music's kind of always been political. We have artists from the civil rights era like Nina Simone or Bob Dylan, and they've always been there expressing their thoughts and their opinions. And we even have artists today, like you mentioned, Kendrick Lamar, everyone being outspoken. So it's not really a shock that, given the times today, that everything's more so political. We were hoping to get your perspective on it, given your artist background and everything.
Yes, of course. Well, music has always been political, like you said, from Bob Dylan, even to new generation of artists. I think music is one of the best ways you can express yourself, your feelings. If you tell a story about your day-to-day experience, a lot of artists have been doing that for a very long time. And I'm gonna use Kendrick Lamar for an example because one of his songs called "All Right," he kind of is mixing hope with the reality of struggle, and that song became connected to the protests and the movements like Black Lives Matter, and another song called "Black of the Berry," and that addresses racism and identity in a more intense, confrontational way.
Okay, yeah. So then, how would you say you personally use music to express yourself? Because you did mention that in general, music is a way of expressing yourself.
Yeah, well, for me, I'm nowhere like Kendrick Lamar. I use my music to kind of speak about things that go through me mentally. Like I often talk about lifestyle, my environment, and sometimes like the struggles when I was younger. So sometimes if the lyrics talk about money or survival or my day-to-day life, they are still a reflection of the things that people grew up in.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree. I think in general, I feel like music has always been a form of expression. I think art has also just in general been a form of expression, and music has always been kind of a tangent of that, which again is kind of what brought the idea to it. Yeah, I mean, You mentioned Kendrick Lamar. He's always been kind of this outspoken artist, and I don't think anyone necessarily needs to be a specific person to necessarily bring up what's going on in the world. Because I mean, there's other artists today that kind of bring it up just in the way they speak or the way they stay educated and promote it online or just in general. It's not necessarily through their music. Would you say that that's something more focused on how you do it, or you just kind of stick to your own area?
Well, for me, I would say I kind of stick to my own, even though I do listen to other artists who can tell their story better than I can. And I think it's enjoyable for me to listen to music like that. But me as a musician, I kind of talk about like relationship issues that I deal with, or just my dealing with different women in my time.
How would you say you balance making something people enjoy versus something that might challenge them?
You know what? I think it would depend on if I do enough research to talk about it. Because I don't want to sit there on a record and say things that I don't really mean, or say things I have little to no knowledge about, because that will kind of paint a picture as an ignorant person.
Hmm. Was there ever a moment, whether it be when you were creating your music or just from growing up and listening to music, has there ever been a moment where you realized that politics was gonna be a part of art, whether it be a part of your art or a part of just what you listen to?
For me, it's like when I was growing up, like I didn't take music very seriously. So I will make a bunch of goofy, meme-ish type of music. And then as I was getting reviews from my peers and my even my sister, like they knew I had potential if I actually took it much serious. So ever since then, as I've been getting older, I've been trying to make as much serious music as I can be. Because back then I used to make a lot of childish music.
Hmm.
So now I feel like I'm in a position where I can make more serious music now due to my experiences.
Would there ever be a point in your life that you think you would potentially use music as an outlet to maybe express things going on in the world, or are you pretty set on the idea of you want to kind of separate your art from what your political beliefs might be?
For me, my political beliefs are my political beliefs. I feel like that I will also be happy to like speak about it if I have enough research and just really to express myself to it. It really just depends on the type of mood, uh, what record I decide to put out.
Do you think music can actually change people's minds, or is it more about making people feel seen?
Well, I guess that can actually be for both. Like it depends on the listener. As long as the artists have a certain explanation of what the meaning of the song is, it would really be up to the consumer to come up with that answer. Because that would be how they would perceive the song. It really just depends on, like, basically I guess would say a mood.
Hmm.
It would say like a mood because like here's the thing. As an artist, it's your job to make like whatever music, whatever art you choose to make. So I feel like once you put something out to the public for consumption, it's up for them to decide. Because as much as you can defend what you really meant, I think once it reaches out to the public, you kind of have no ownership of it in a way, because that's when the public is going to decide what you really mean. Well, that's how society is now. Because back then, they were like very much political. If you listen to the music back then, they would talk about the racial injustice
Hmm.
from NWA, from rappers in Brooklyn.
Yeah, so every time someone listens to music or a song, they'll always find a way to relate it back to themselves, and not one person has the same lived experience. But those are all my questions. Thank you again for providing a great deal of answers and providing a unique perspective for us. Yeah, thank you. Overall, from both interviews and both perspectives, I think we were able to gain such a value difference in how our artist's perspective shares that he personally doesn't mix politics with music, but does seek out the music as a listener. And it's interesting because he goes on to say that he writes what he feels and he uses music as a form of expression. And I think it goes on to what we've been talking about and including even our student perspective, Sergio, and how he says that music is a form of expression and it's a way to kind of talk about what's going on and explain your own feelings of everything. And for some, that is talking about what's going on in this world. And while our artist's perspective didn't necessarily share that he wants to do politics with music, he's not stepping away from it. He's not saying that it doesn't have a place for it. In fact, I think he himself agrees that music and politics do have a place together, and it shouldn't be a shock to anyone, as I mentioned.
Exactly. And I think a very important thing, music is more political now than ever because that same administration that was voted in by certain people, they're trying to take away freedom of speech, our First Amendment right as American people. Even though it's not officially taken away, we see every day how they're trying to silence people speaking out against ICE. I think for Coachella weekend, Carol G was headlining.
Didn't Trump
Uh-huh.
or someone say that she would be deported if she spoke out about ICE or something?
Exactly. We need more people speaking out, maybe in a more discreet way as music, but you see what they're trying to do. They're trying to take away our right to speak out against our government, which that's our right. So I feel like that's why music is becoming so political because
Yeah.
people are trying to find loopholes to still get the message out and to educate people, but also save themselves, save their asses, if that makes sense.
No, exactly. And I think a great point to that is another Coachella thing was the Strokes. And I don't know, I don't think they showed anything their first weekend, but this past weekend, I do know that for one of their songs in the background, it was a bunch of presidents from out of countries. It then cuts to them being overthrown by the FBI. And I will say I'm not fully educated on the details of that, so I won't go too heavily on that just because I'm not going to spread something I'm not fully knowledgeable on. As I'm editing and listening to what I was speaking about regarding the Strokes, I did some brief research about the situation, and it was their last song of the night of their set. They performed the song Oblivious. During their performance, which the previous weekend, they didn't do anything, I should say, major. They had little jokes or teases where Julian Casablanca's jokes, "You guys excited about the draft?" But in weekend two, this time, as they're performing Oblivious, they have in the background a montage of, like I mentioned, the different presidents, and as well as scenes of missile strikes in Gaza destroying universities, and back to what I said about the presidents from different countries, so historical references to assassinated leaders. But yeah, I just wanted to add a brief little recap on what exactly I was saying because I wasn't too knowledgeable at the time when speaking on it, but after doing some research, I wanted to provide some well-needed context. But I think it's a great way to show it because I could be wrong again, but I don't think the song that they were singing necessarily was connected to what was being shown on the screen, but they themselves have always been an outspoken band about beliefs and about politics and everything. That it goes back to what I was saying about even artists just taking their songs off of like social platforms, whether or
Mhm.
not it's political music or it's just fun pop music, it's still them expressing their belief by doing this.
Right, right. I 100% agree.
Let's end this on a positive note with the Bad Bunny Super Bowl. He said, "The only thing more powerful than hate is love." And in the ending of his Super Bowl performance, he holds up the football and it says, "Together we are America." And I remember
Mhm.
when Bad Bunny first got announced that he was going to be the Super Bowl halftime show, everyone was getting upset saying, "Oh, he's not even from here. Oh, he's going to be
Mhm.
deported, this and that." But what do you mean? He is from here. He was born
Yeah.
and raised in Puerto Rico, and that's a form of the United States. And even if he wasn't, who cares? The whole outcry of creating a whole separate like, halftime show was beyond crazy. And I think Bad Bunny's response to it was very important because I think in a world so driven by hate and division, that
Mhm.
if we only come together and unite as one and remind ourselves we are all individuals, we all have our own things. We don't need to hate each other just on what we look or just of how we speak, et cetera, et cetera. We just need to love one another. And I think that's a great ending point because
Great.
we are so, I'm going to repeat myself again, we're so divided as a country that I think the only way to get better is to love each other, to stop hating each other. There's no reason to be so hateful to one another when all we're all trying to do is exist.
Yeah, I agree. And, I can only pray that things get better from here. But yeah, keep fighting back, y'all. And don't let anybody silence you, especially your government. You have the right to speak out on anything you feel is necessary.
And a good reminder that love is always the answer, and to be kind to one another. Treat people the way you would like to be treated is the best way I could say it. I'm Danny.
My name is Amari, and thank you so much for coming to our podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you guys for listening.
This podcast was produced by students in the journalism department at California State University, Northridge. Visit our YouTube channel at SoCal Voices Impact Device for more episodes.